Ooh, I am not hearing you at all.
Oh, that would be why I accidentally turned it off.
That's much better.
I'm here again with EA Koetting, and today's subject will probably be around the new human being and the new society was what I propose. So let's welcome him with a new order for the previous Vmmh chant, and I'm doing this in the order that he is given for the for the 9 gatekeepers. So that's why it's ordered differently. Gzmax one vdoz Gzmax one Gzmax one and okay, I wasn't sure if I messed up with the sound again. So what is new with you? That's
Well, you know, I've spent the last 3 or 4 months working with Kali under the demonic name of Abaddon, and I've transitioned from that into working with Lucifuge, and it's interesting to go from destruction and complete utter blackness into Lucifuge, who still has the essence of the darkness, one who flees the light, etc., but still has a high degree of order. There's an interesting switch there from not chaos. I wouldn't say chaos for Kali, but it sure seems like chaos sometimes. And then going into Lucifuge being extraordinarily ordered. And so, as I'm working with these gatekeepers, I'm not just evoking them and talking to them, but I'm invoking them and becoming them. And so I've become keenly aware of the dramatic shift in my personality, even my appearance, my choice of clothing, my everything shifts as these beings come through. And then obviously the shockwave as it moves out into my life also obviously affects the people closest to me most. And so it's interesting to have my relationships roll with all of the change. But it does roll. That's the amazing thing.
And much like in the Bhagavad Gita, it's the whole what you choose to involve is like, oh, those who worship the ghosts and spirits do this, and go here, go to them, and those who worship the angels go there, and those who worship the demons go here, and of course it varies among which ones you are actually calling on. What happens to you?
Yeah, absolutely. The Bhagavad Gita, I come back to over and over and over again. I remember I was, I think, 19, maybe 20 years old, and my sister was dating a doctor in Las Vegas, and I went over and hung out at his house, and he had spent some time in India doing some training there, training the medical field in there, and so he had a collection of interesting books and idols, statues. But the Bhagavad Gita, for some reason, just pulled my attention right to it, and it's kind of just tucked with all the other books, and I pulled it off the shelf, and I'll tell you what, that one text, it summarizes so many spiritual principles and even magical methods that when you really start investigating and applying more than anything, show you a real true middle path of ascent. It's really a pretty amazing text.
Well, pretty much every text of that regard that actually claims it for itself, rather than, like, for example, people not knowing that the last line of the Book of Revelations is only talking about the Book of Revelations, and so any real claim about here's a summary book, here's a summary of all these paths, and here's like sort of are something actually for everyone, unlike how the Bible says that Jesus says, well, I only came for the lost of the children of Israel. So, Jesus didn't really intend to be the universal messenger that they kind of put him as. But, they're all sort of very, very sort of things in comparison. And there's hidden little things you can understand. And I'm rambling.
Yeah, no, well, and that is an interesting, actually an interesting point you bring up, is that there does seem to be, especially in monotheism, there's a strong focus on tribalism, on like, these are my people, and that doesn't seem to exist as much, at least in the Vedic religions that have sprung out of that. So, yeah, no, it is an interesting kind of shift, and I'll tell you what, the Abrahamic religions do tend to have a very strong in-group, out-group mentality.
Well, definitely the henotheistic, polytheistic groups that pretend like they're monotheist really have it. I'm, speaking of dispersion, I'm pleased to announce my first published article. Self-published doesn't really count in the same way, but not that there's not accomplishment through that, but in Quran's on 4 by Marketing Press, my article on the Georgia Guidestones refuting the certain conspiracy theorists and offering sort of a post-apocalyptic, pre-apocalyptic sort of a view of the place.
Congratulations on that. Yeah, getting your work published is an interesting leap into the public foray. That's cool. So good job on that.
Which I don't know why those suggestions, they put all these suggestions up, and I guess so one of the things that's been suggested to me more online lately is all these former Mormon, anti-Mormon sort of videos or something for some reason, and I don't even know why, but I guess as that church grows to be it's, if you break up the Southern Baptist Convention, it's really, okay, the Catholics are still bigger than in this country, but I guess the anti-Mormon movement would be growing amongst that, and I've had some thoughts in that regards, and one of the things that I figured out, a very interesting thing that I can't find anybody else that seems to know this, that was one of them, but there's this, do you remember the phrase Vmmh?
I'm sorry, say that one more time.
Do you remember the phrase Vmmh?
No, I'm not. It's not in my memory right now.
Well, it's one of those Book of Mormon terms that you don't quite know. And the interesting thing is the tribe that supposedly set up this Vmmh was their name, Zoramite. It's Diruma is actually the Aramea for that, and that means the heavy ejaculators, which I thought was a very interesting title for a tribe. But the Vmmh, you may know that it starts with the biblical word for unicorn, and it ends with the phrase that etymologically connects to Tiamat, or the female Satan, because shaitan means gift of the the sea beast or whatever, but you can tie it to Tum, which is later referred to as Tiamat, but first Tiatum and then Tiamat. So it's sort of a beast of the sea, beast of the land, sort of merging middle pillar sort of thing. Now I think it's Baptist fan fiction of the Bible or something like that, but it brings up some interesting ideas that a person could work with.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you look at Joseph Smith and his whole, not only his background, but his life, his interests, and I'll tell you what, it's he was channeling something. He was there was something coming through. He was definitely a student of the occult, no doubt about that. And Yeah, the claims that he made about the origins of the golden plates and Book of Mormon and all that, that's obviously just backstory that he added into his channeling, but it is
the detail of that. It's all the witnesses for some sort of visionary element to it, so it could be what you call enchantment. Like if you've heard of W.B. Yeats, his Celtic Twilight, I think was the text. He talks about he visits this place and these people put this thing on him, and it's like things are moving around and stuff, but it's it's psychic, and there's people who can do that. They can change the perception of reality and stuff. And I've looked at stones and surfaces and stuff, and sometimes you actually see some sort of text in the stone. Sometimes beings appear and talk to you. It's pretty cool. It works.
Yeah. The biggest part of that is to be able to immerse yourself enough in the experience that you forget to analyze it. That you can just have the experience. You see something popping out in a shadow or in a stone or in a scrying mirror or even in the incense smoke, rather than going, oh well, that's obviously just my imagination. If you dive into it, it tends to come to life. But interesting about the witnesses to the Book of Mormon, every single one of them left the church either before or after Joseph Smith's death. And so none of them actually stayed with.
I thought it was 8 out of 11 and people on both lists. So that kind of is one of the strongest things against it is the.
Oh, okay. I thought it was all, but you may be right. I'm a little rusty because I haven't been in a church file. So yeah.
But it actually 8 left. I think 8 left for good. Maybe a couple of them actually. I think a couple of those went back, but it's kind of. But what he did, he saw hypocrisy in some issues in society, and he really, he wanted something to be the case, and like they're trained, to feel and think your way through things, and you supposedly think that it's someone, guidance from other than yourself, and obviously the leaders of that group are no longer too good at it as the time progressed. It became a sort of. You've been a church leader for so long, and then you finally make your way up. It was not,
Well, it was interesting. There's actually so within any, well, no, I shouldn't say any, but within most religions, there are secret orders, and within the LDS Church, there are definitely secret orders. There's one definite secret order, and the Order of the Firstborn, and within this order, I had some interesting conversations with some folks who, one fellow told me, kind of walked me through the lineage of prophets in the LDS Church, and he said the last prophet was Joseph Fielding Smith, and indeed he was the last one to say that he had literally walked and talked with Jesus. Everyone since him, and that was I don't remember the year that he was, the years or era that he was the prophet, but all the others after that would say that they basically had a confirmation from the Holy Spirit, which really, if you've been to a testimony meeting, is just a warm feeling inside. It's nothing substantial, whereas Joseph Smith had a very, very physical materialization of Jesus that was witness to him of his prophecy. So at that point, it's thought that the church kind of stopped being a vehicle for the true religion or the true spiritual order that it comes after, and it's been corrupted ever since.
And my sister, I didn't witness this myself until it wasn't going on, but she had sort of a Jack Mormon group, and I guess as yeah, someone's got to take the whole former Mormon thing and the grimoire, the Book of Mormon, Satanism, the grimoire of the anti-Nephi Lehis, and other former members of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. Yeah, that.
Well, there are stories with
what?
there are stories within the Book of Mormon as well as the Doctrine and Covenants. It talks about it, and then in modern LDS lore, there's stories of the Gadianton robbers, and these were the bad guys, and they were robbers, but they were also Satanists, devil worshippers. They would meet in these caves and worship the devil and get his instruction. And it's said that there are cults of Gadianton robbers. I have yet to find any. I would love to, but it is an interesting antithesis of the LDS Church that they have this. They either have created, or I would say created, a group of enemies so they could have a perpetual bad guy to fight. It's just, yeah, it's very
much like if you look at Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina, dozens of places named after the devil because all these Baptists that showed up here, well, not all of them, but certainly enough of them thought we are so important. The devil needs to set up headquarters outside of town, so they find something weird, and okay, this is his spot. So it turns out there's that's, I'm trying to see if there's some sort of public access. Sometimes there are places that the people who own it don't officially don't want to taken over as a tourist site like it used to be, or they want to kind of limit the people, so they have they put up a sign or something, but it's really a secret that you can visit there. So I'm trying to figure out whether that's actually the case with the trampling ground, because it's obviously like a meteor strike or something. There's probably radiation. There's probably there's obviously iron about that's like doing weird things with the trees, and animals don't like it and stuff like this. But there's like an offering pit, and someone's got to properly go there and film it. And I'm considering doing that next month or something. And anyways, let's get to some questions. Things are so. Well, you mentioned communication with spirit. So, what does your soul or spirit call you towards?
What does it call me towards?
Yeah.
I mean, the big answer would be ascent, just growth, ongoing development of the self in every dimension. We are multi-dimensional entities. The state that we're now in of physicality is not a downgrade; it's an upgrade. This is the evolved state, and so with that, it's my mission at least to push forward into the unknown, to discover more about myself and this world that I create as I observe it, and to see how far I can stretch that.
You've mentioned the 9 gatekeepers and others. What other beings and organizations would you bring into your life, or go and unite with, or bring into being, if there's a type of organization that you think should be the...
Yeah, I think organizations are the death of good philosophy and practice, really. And that's unfortunate, because I happen to be one that starts up organizations. And nevertheless, they are, once anything becomes organized, it becomes a lot less personalized. But I am a fan of systems, and my work for the next year and a half to 2 years now is going to be continuing forward with the gatekeepers. The gatekeepers are interesting because they have seemingly appeared in most world religions, and so as I focus on one of them, I tend to dip my toes into a bunch of different systems. What's on the horizon after the gatekeepers, though? I do have a strong pull towards the Agora, to the Shaivistic practices that really I would probably need to travel east and spend some time there, which is actually going to line up really well. My daughter is 14 now, and so as I'm wrapping up this course, she's going to really not have much use for old dad, and so I'll start to make plans for doing some long-term travels and go check out stuff. You know, I do have a very strong interest in India, and specifically in the parts of India that aren't on the tourist guide. And so yeah, I'll probably find myself gravitating there. Indonesia has some interesting things to offer. But yeah, but I'm not sure. You know, I feel like I see 2 or 3 steps ahead of me, and I can see those steps pretty clearly, but I don't get the rest beyond that until I take those steps. And so it is an interesting path of living, like Bruce Lee and Buddhists say, you know, be like water, just to have that flow where nothing is really planned and it's as spontaneous as possible. So yeah, just kind of go ahead.
Have you had that sort of Queen of Swords sort of detached head sort of experience going on? Or maybe the concept of like of all the former images that got you there kind of smashed, and then you find out the real ego?
Yeah, yeah. In some very literal ways as well. You know, so as when I was engaged in what I was told at the time was Vedon, it really wasn't. It was a bastardized version of, I guess, a bastardized version of Vedon in some respects. Yeah, my mentor, the Prince, told me that once
I didn't hear you for a bit before you said the Prince.
Okay, yeah. So while I was engaged in, initiated into a bastardized version of Haitian Vedon, the Prince, he told me once you connect with the spirit, once you have a true communion with an entity, it is with you always. And I was like, okay, so it's always going to be answering my call. He says, no. From that moment forward and that moment backwards, infinitely, that being is a part of you. And I had no clue really what he meant. It took me years of practice to experience that, but it is very much the case that you are integrated with and changed by the entities that you are working with. And so, yeah, no, absolutely, it is a collision of sometimes very violent and very contrary forces within the self, and it can be a lot to deal with. You know, it's interesting. I see people in my field, and specifically like people in my company and Become a Living God, that drop like flies. The insanity that tends to grab people and throws them into the pit is really something to behold. I'm seeing just about everybody going crazy, and I can't say that I'm immune to that either. But it is part of the game.
One of the things I've heard from people that one guy worked in prison, the other guy worked in a psychiatric hospital, and he thought that it was really weird that it's like you can change. Oh, can you not hear me?
Yeah, you're a little quiet, but you're all right.
So
I don't know if you.
So they'd say that for about a month a year, there'd be like this certain experiences that some people would be having and certain behaviors that would be going on with like take a break. But the thing is, it's like, okay, maybe the spirits would leave some people alone for a thing. But you know, if what you've allowed yourself to become, it's like, you know, you don't want to go into things with this. I don't know if it's quite articulate, but the Necronomicon sort of way of, you know, you do this ritual and then you throw up like a hand sign or something, or something that says, oh, well, no, I worship the eldest elder, and basically to banish the thing. And it's like, well, if you're afraid of keeping around what you're doing, you know, well, maybe you need to be afraid, but you know what I mean. Why do this stuff and vanish later and all this?
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, that's kind of human nature or cultural cultural programming or something. But you know, it's like people do that with people too. You know, people will start hanging out with let's say me and associating with me, and they'll start picking up some of my practices, some of my philosophies, some of my beliefs, some of my what would you say, indulgences, and then pretty quickly they'll scamper away and go, oh no, you made me do this, and you made me think differently than I did or than I would, and so people do that. It's a way of kind of safeguarding yourself from your own actions and the consequences thereof. You know, it's like so many people they'll cast love spells or curses, or what's really great is when people call on sexual entities, succubus and incubus characters, and then pretty quickly, you know, especially after the orgasm is over, they go, oh well, no, I didn't mean that. I don't really want this contact. Okay.
Well, speaking of not wanting this contact, I guess I'll go back on the LDS thing. It's like I learned how to read hieroglyphs and a bunch of and different other languages, and one of the things I noticed, it's like one of those things in the Book of Abraham that says, well, we'll tell you when you get into the temple. On that outer rim of the second one, it talks about this copulating bull, and it's like, what are they going to do to you in the temple? They're talking, you know, something about a copulating bull. I mean, I'm not sure I'm up for that.
Are you talking about the hypocephalus of Shishong? The circular? Yeah. Oh yeah, I'll tell you what. That is such an amazing seal to work with. And while I was still in the LDS church, I took that and I drew it in. I drew it in large formats. Like I actually look at every piece of it because it's pretty small in the actual book. And
I drew it up and laminated it myself. And
yeah, it's an interesting opening of a gateway, and what they don't explicitly tell you anything about it in the temple, at least not the level of the temple that I got into, which was basically just the washing, anointing, and whatnot. Maybe they
if you look at what they mean by translation, it's he looked at stuff and, oh yeah, sure, he could write a paragraph that included part of the character that he said. So he said one character up to 25 things, and that's sort of how he did it. So basically, he could, as long as he said something in it that kind of resembled what it said. So the nibbly argument of, see how I, you know, it's like, wait, a couple verses that something relates to what the picture looks like, and it's what the picture looks like. But yeah, it's an interesting text because you have omitting the actual Egyptian names. You have Isis and Osiris and Horus, and you have the four sons, and you have this other stuff going on. So you have this cosmology to work with, and you're bringing things into being, and things are working for you. And
yeah, you know, and I actually sent a copy of my blown up version of the Hexaphalus to a couple people that were into obscure languages, and just said, you know, look at this, and yeah, I got a much better, not necessarily translation, but an idea, because there's a lot going on in that seal. There's a ton of information compacted into that. So
it's like if you pick up the Bible and you actually know the actual languages, not there's a lot of misinterpretations, and a lot of they're just really narrow about it, trying to make it sound less spiritual of a text than it is. And there are certain implications. It's like Roma is not just fulfillment; it's sort of the implication of like the spirits, the jinn, and Uranon is the heavens. It could be the angels, it could be realms, and there's all sorts of little things like this. And you find out that like the Goetia which you can use as a system of initiation. It's 72. It's 4 elementals, and the secret one that most texts don't mention about, Hell, is kind of like a merging of the first and the last. It's in place of the first and the last. If you look into it linguistically as degrees of initiation, both in finding verses associated with it. At least that process helped me, and hopefully some of what I figured out is going to be beneficial to others, other than, oh, he tells some interesting, colorful stories about what he saw and felt. But yeah, when you go through the process, like all of them, you pick up any of these grimoires and go through the process of every single being instead of just, oh, I like this one and this one, or oh, I know this is going to work. But then you find out that there's stuff along the way that if you do it, it maybe gets you something that you wouldn't have got if you just, picked the one thing that you were looking for.
Yeah, Orly Stewart is an author and artist that's at Become a Living God, and I'm so glad she is, because she is genius, and she has put together a full path-working course through the Goetia, and that's she kind of sees it in a similar way, where sure, you can pick and choose what spirits you want to work through. That's the lesser, the less powerful use of that text, though, that it is an order of operations that, if you follow through, is an equation that produces a result, and that result is your ascent. And once again, when we talked about these entities, that they become part of you, their influence never leaves. They once you digest them, they combine with who you are at a very core level. You become basically a combination of all of them. You become all 72 manifest. You become the anchor for these spirits. I think that's the point. It's not just to call on them and use them, but to call on them and become them.
And we go through different stages psychologically in life and stuff too. Some would define it as about 7 stages, and it's nature does stuff to its to oneself, especially for the women. It's like the men, we had to go. Society has generally had to do something really dramatic around 13 or that to the males, but the women, they're menstruating. They're put them in the special hut for a few days and bring them food, and it just happens to themselves. And if no one brings them food, it still happens to themselves. And certainly birth and death and some things would do that. But so how might a natural or a imposed sort of set of initiations per se work themselves?
How would a natural set of initiations work? It's it is interesting, because the religious rites of passage are all aligned with those different stages of growth and maturation. Like you said at the opening here, we want to talk about the evolution of the human being and the evolution of human society, and the point you just touched on is pretty amazing, which is that we are, our society, our religion, so much of who we are is centered around our environment, and the pull of the moon, the circulation around the sun. That in order for us to take another huge leap in evolution, we have to put ourselves into a new environment, meaning that we need to leave this planet and find another. And through that, we're going to have a completely new set of stimulus to adapt to, and that's going to be amazing. We're on the cusp of it. We've got not just Elon Musk, although he's one of my favorites, but we have several different people, several companies, and it's interesting. The corporations are taking the lead on this, but trying to get us to Mars at this point, and that's just the next leap. After that, we're looking at the moon Titan and potentially other planets. Eventually, as soon as we're able to close the gap where we don't have to travel a line to get from point A to point B, where we can collapse the space in between, that changes everything. And I think we're getting
thus far we can only do this sort of psychically. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Stargate ritual of the Egyptians, where they'd align with the star, particularly around the equinoxes was the more common time. There was also the heliacal rising of Sirius that was Sirius that was used. And you literally, you're like, you're twisting through some sort of colorful, strange lights and sounds, and that's about all I got. That was certainly successful enough for me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, and we can do it psychically. I think it's important. The things that we want to do physically is important that we do that psychically first, so we can know that it's even possible. First off, until it's possible in here, it's not going to be possible in the flesh. And then the second part of that is that the experiments that are going on at laboratories like CERN are very interesting in that they have demonstrated the ability to teleport, for lack of a better word, an electron from one point to another, as well as to send electrons back through time, and that's interesting. And so far it's just barely breaking from theoretical into practical, and it's just an electron, but that is a huge leap forward. As soon as we're able to do that with more than electrons, then we're on the road to being able to do pretty much whatever the hell we want.
Well, certainly, back to the initiation thing. It's certainly not what, like, I've looked into groups that it's like you spend a certain amount of time in the group, and every other group you don't even have to prove some level of knowledge or something to get your way through the degrees. But I guess, particularly in this corporate age where corporations are like forming, corporate religions are being formed, or corporate churches are being formed, and I guess for the vast majority of people, that's sort of something they almost need is this. Oh well, you've done your time. Here's your initiation, or here's your stage, and you haven't. And I also understand in terms of it's like people aren't accomplishing and learning and otherwise what they used to. So therefore, it's like, the past 20 years in quality of Latter-day Saint missionaries has gone down drastically. And I mean, the way they could talk to people and stuff, it's like, oh, someone can afford a mission and they're not going to be an embarrassment to them. Let's have a mission. It used to be stricter than that, and they used to train them better. But
to be fair to the Mormon Church, they do have a really amazing training program at the Missionary Training Center as far as language immersion and the language immersion. I think is the most impressive because within weeks a person can learn Spanish, French, German, and be fluent enough to be put on the streets and be conversational. It is pretty amazing. It's interesting though because it's a similar complaint that I have about the military, where it's like maybe they ought to be taking people who have the capability of choosing for themselves. I wouldn't trust a 19-year-old to help me with my taxes or to tell me how to plan my business. They're just not capable. We don't trust them enough to allow them to drink alcohol in the United States.
Well, that's the funny thing. It's like, with all these statute agents and stuff, it's like nothing becomes right or somehow safe or something with a particular age. And it's like, I remember when people realized I was 30, that some people, it's like, oh, you're 30, we can trust you. Like, really should we expect of a 12-year-old? But they're not admitting that you're like as responsible as a 12-year-old. Now, I do understand something that I didn't understand younger. It's like even 8 years old, we were told. I remember going around the playground. It's like, oh, I'm going to have to be fully accountable for everything, and I better sin while I have a chance. And I was 8. I couldn't think of anything. I saw people freaking out with drugs in the neighborhood. That wasn't something I wanted to try really. So that didn't appease me, or I don't even know if it would have been available to me if I. But you know, and wait, the thing I understand now it's like nowadays it's like you used to be, as a male, 12 to 16, 17 or something before you hit puberty, you used to be like the normal. And people understand maybe something was wrong if you hit puberty before that. Same thing with the female. Now people are hitting puberty 7, 8, 9 years old, and it's like it turns out their mind's not there. But one of the things the psychologists say is that that's each stage of life is automatically, it sort of changes your abilities to think and stuff like this. And you automatically you instantly have like independent morality and the ability to choose it. But of course, your society teaches yourself. It's like people who turn in their cults because they're forcing us to marry people, and we don't want to marry our uncle. No, it's the teenagers that turn them in. It's not the people in their 30s or before that. It's the adolescents thinking to themselves, even though they've been isolated and trained not to. There's other issues that happen with some groups that isolate, but I mean that's one thing that probably hits the news because people are more likely to talk about it. But then again, we're told in this society we're treated like kids, and we're said, when you have a bunch of kids, when you have kids you don't want, and other consequences, it's like it's probably too late to, maybe not too late, but for some people.
Yeah, I mean, so as far as I'm concerned, the one of the biggest problems that we have in society is the family unit. Family unit is it teaches patriarchy, it teaches obedience, even though it might not make sense. It teaches a lot of things that are very valuable to keeping people in line, but not very valuable to making people excellent. And I look forward to the time where sex is for fun and reproduction is done in a laboratory, and we can start to modify the human being and really target what we want them to be. That's
So what specifically do you think is missing that we could do something with in the future?
Well, I mean, first off, we could definitely use to live a lot longer. I think that's one of the biggest things. I think that's one of the first things that's going to be worked on when the shackles are taken off. And that's the thing, that shackles aren't really binding China, for instance. China, who's doing these interesting experiments with genetic manipulation.
Now, something hasn't been claimed too much in recent years. Okay, there's a few more once you get like 137 or something. There's been 2 people in modern times that have been claimed to live 140 or older, and China has one of them. Well, China had one of them. There was this guy that they showed through genetics and otherwise that this was the guy. Somehow, this guy living his Taoist balanced diet or something. He looked like a living mummy, mind you, but he died in the past 10 years at 252, they say, and his grandchildren, they showed genetically that this guy was who he said he was, and they showed through fingerprints and stuff like that, which is actually not as strong of evidence as some other things, but and this guy but it wasn't just that he lived long. I mean, it's like that song on the South Park, get smoke because who wants to live to be 90 anyways, and might as well. They had sort of a Epicurean lifestyle, you could say. They had their children, they had their enjoyment. They didn't take any risks that they saw was too much, but that didn't hold them back from the joys of life. And the more advanced the society gets, the more reasons we find to die. It's like the things that used to, my sisters could die any week now, and she may not have had this condition for another 20 years or so if it weren't for the chemical exposures that we get in our modern society. And there was a couple markers of that sort of thing. And me, it's like I can eat basically. Okay, I'm white, so dairy doesn't do too well with me and basically all my family on both sides. If we could, oh, it's America, so we tend to have dairy anyways, but not me. But yeah, I could kill myself in 3 to 6 months living like a typical American, and the doctors told me that. It's like I was like already 3 months in, and they to the doctor, and they looked at but if I eat whole foods, if I don't eat all this chemically treated garbage, I can probably live to be my 90s like family members on both sides.
Yeah, there is the fact that the convenience of modern society is it comes with its cost. I think we would all be better if every chicken that we ate we had to go kill and raised it as from an egg. But that
it's not easy to kill chickens in front of other animals, in front of cats. By the way, the chickens. Carrying out a chicken out at night, gotta find them in the trees and whatnot and pull them down, and I could sing the chicken, be utterly still with a big old knife in my hand, but the cats love me, so the cats would show up and the chicken would puff up and start fighting like a it wasn't that it's not an easy thing to do once you get I don't know why I brought that up, but
I think one of the real issues are people will say often that you only see specifically cancer as prevalent as it is in developed parts of the world, that you don't see that in second or third world countries as much. Well, you also see people dying a lot younger, so it's hard to say, necessarily if they wouldn't have developed cancer or some other issue down the road. But I think one of the real issues is that I do love Abraham Maslow and a lot of his ideas about things, and specifically, we as a society seem to be stuck in between the pyramid that rises, that lifts to the peak of self-actualization. We have all of our basic needs taken care of, not necessarily for us, but it's not too hard to have a roof over your head, to have food and clothing, and a sexual partner, and to have enough spare time to engage in the arts. So we have all of these basic needs, these human needs fulfilled, but then we have the transcendental needs of what does it mean to be more than just a human animal surviving, and we don't have that answer for people enough, and so there's almost like a clawing at what else is there, what is beyond success. And it's interesting, in working with Lucifuge recently, he actually kind of addressed that when I asked him why the emphasis on wealth. He is all about wealth and gold and hidden treasure. And he actually, let me bring up what he said here. Said, money is power. Once you have attained wealth, you can transcend greed. When money is no longer a concern, you can shift your focus from survival to purpose. And that's interesting, because you do have, if you're living paycheck to paycheck, there is a feeling deep inside of like, well, I can't lose my job. I can't let things slip. Or I'm not going to be able to survive. And when you're still in the survivalistic instinct, you're not able to really reach to the next rung of ascent. And so that is an interesting point that he made about using these powers to manifest wealth.
Well, this certainly it's been more physical, but otherwise this idea of it's done for you, and those stages of development. If you're familiar with the Crowleyan sort of mother, father, child stage. It's like, well, it's not that you give up relationships or skills or something. It's that you know, you're the adolescent or older, and you got to put off, accept or leave and develop what's there, and people are more and more depending on their country to do things for them. Some spiritual leader in the past or present has went through the stages for me, instead of, we got, self-realization, self-actualization, God realization, whatever other form of consciousness and stuff that you want to bring about in one's life. It's like, well, we can say what it is, but we're not going to achieve it ourselves. We're not trying to achieve it ourselves. It's been done. And people even of paths that very distinctly say stuff like, oh, it's not about, not about what your fathers said. You got to figure out this stuff if it's really a thing for yourselves. And, you got to do your own hero deeds. But people are like, oh, well, it's been done so well before. And look at this golden age of, every other person who's Muslim will talk about the golden age and stuff. Well, why aren't you trying to bring about, your ideal society now instead of talking about the past? Now, I'm not saying that that's a universal problem. I'm saying it's common enough that it is something you encounter. That it's like, oh, well, look at how just certain countries and stuff were in the past. It's like, well, got to overturn those dictators and stuff now.
Well, since we've had a common theme throughout this conversation of referencing LDS teachings, there's an interesting teaching of Adam on Diamond, which is the entrance to the Garden of Eden, basically. And I think that they say that that's in Missouri, but whatever, it doesn't matter where it was at, because what it really is and so the teaching is that that's where we came from, being the Garden of Eden, and that's where in the end of days that we will, at least the saints will return to, is to Adam on Diamond. There will be I suppose the prophet would come on the general conference and say, everybody go to Missouri. But what it really is it's all prophecy, as well as all tales of the past, are telling us something about ourselves right now. And so it's not a matter of waiting till the end of days to go to this promised land, but it's a matter of building Daemoniacus or building the infernal empire, whatever it is that you're looking forward to, building it here and now, making your life and your world represent what you want it to. We have an interesting,
like what the case is. If you, this whole blood and soil Zionism thing, they're really good about the 1 or 2 verses that support them, but the 200-300 verses that obviously don't support them, the actual references to Yun, it's the shining example. It's like, we're rich and repent, and then you'll be my people. That's how Isaiah 41 is really translated, and you have various things like that. It's like, oh no, you got to. It's not being born or something. You've got to bring it out yourself, and that's what's holding things back. And you do find some stuff happens, and then they're like, oh, well, we defeated the communists, or we defeated this, or and then the people give up on supporting, and then then back comes the dictator, just like how Judaism as a historical entity was founded. There was problems, and the Maccabees dealt with it. But Maccabees, because the people's like, oh, well, we've had our victory. It's like, no, dude, you got to stay with it. But they didn't stay with it, and then the Maccabees turned into just as bad of tyrants as the Romans and Greeks.
Yeah. Well, and then the flip side of that is that while you have the conflict that you're engaged in, it makes it really, really easy for the tyrants to get your support. It's I'll tell you what, the military enlistment rate just skyrocketed after 9/11. People were all about government support. You have war is very good for church and state, for sure. So, yeah, and then you have it's interesting. There's this serial killer cannibal, Nico Clow, in France, and he spent some time in a mental hospital, and then he was released, and so he's on the streets, and he's an occultist and an artist and interesting fellow all around. And one of the things he said is that sexual deviance and perversions and fetishes, you only see the rise of those in really peacetime. That's what we do to occupy our bloodlust while we're not out there literally raping and pillaging, and that we see that on a massive rise as we have war crimes, that you're not able to let yourself go completely animalistic while you're out at war. And so we see a lot of these perversions rising up is because we need to have a vent for those impulses. I don't know that I agree with him, but it is an interesting.
It's at one sense this idea of denying any sense of limits instead of trying to figure out, okay, I'm a human, here's my circumstances, and at the other time trying to impose these artificial limits that people saying from the pulpit we need to turn away from the natural man. And I guess that's part of why the Georgia Guidestones got considered so evil by a lot of the preachers. Like, oh, he's telling us, he's encouraging natural living. No, we don't want that. We're the stewards of the earth. We can do what we want. Like I've seen in bathroom stalls across the country. God made Christians to be stewards of the earth, and that includes bathroom stalls and various phrases like that.
No, that's interesting. Now, unfortunately, I do have to jump off of here in just a minute and get back to some filming. You have some final thoughts that we can pass around before I have to go?
Well, oh yeah. This was going to be a shorter one. Okay. And anything to disassociate with, and the second one would be: is there any symbolic sort of way to represent these changes, either on an individual or society level, that you would have?
Yeah, what to disassociate ourselves with is, religion, I think, and that's religion of any sort, and that includes modern science. Modern science has become its own religion. It has suppositions that aren't weighed out logically. What was his name? Fellow, he did Rupert Sheldrake. Rupert Sheldrake has an interesting TED Talk that he did, as well as some interviews that he did concerning the religion of science, and it's really spectacular. He's a brilliant fellow. Divorce ourselves from religion. It's a system of disempowerment, rather than, like you said, rather than finding the answers yourself, that you're given.
I hate that it's taken this shift in meaning that it used to be the word means relationship with all, and it's taken this thing where you better accept, and these people are over you, rather than, as can be pointed out. And you pick up the Avestan text, you pick up the Apocryphal text, on the same position, you pick up certain parts of the Bible. A nation with their own spiritual authority, leading their own spiritual lives, not necessarily, here's someone that has to do it for you, either because they're ordained or whatever the deal is. But that's what it's taken its thing to. I understand why, most people that are Christian practically don't even go to church on a yearly basis in this country anymore, because and parts of Europe too, because it's like they want to hear that they should be in control of their life, that they have to get some approval.
Yeah. Well, and I think we've lost in our Western society. We've lost the importance of the personal spiritual journey, that you do have to go out into the wilderness. You have to, and that there is something really important about the spirit walk, that you have to actually leave your home. You have to go with the things that you need to survive, go out into the wilderness, and by yourself find your spirit, find your path. And that's, not only is that not allowed, it's just not something that we've made room for. We haven't made room for the personal spiritual journey. As as an integral part of our lives.
Mythologized areas that used to all be mythologized. I've the 8 caves, and there's a mountain that I plan to do a contemplative walk and try to build that, and maybe take different trips out there and stuff, and try to actually mythologize something that's probably privately owned for 200-300 years and finally became accessible to the public. And I, figure out what spiritual things are going on there. But the finding out your
Yeah, no, I'm totally, and interestingly, with a lot of these spirit walks or these journeys, these spirit journeys, a walkabout or whatever, a lot of them do mythologically involve a literal ascent, going literally up into a mountain and taking yourself to a higher elevation. There is something interesting and magically potent in doing that, in getting yourself into touch with the spirits of the air as you're up as close to you as you can get to them, and at the same time still being grounded. It's a really interesting, very cool experience. But yeah, I mean, once again, I've got a 14-year-old daughter, and I would be pretty scared for her to give her a backpack full of stuff and say, okay, we'll see you whenever you find your path, kiddo, and kick her out the door. That's just not something that, once again, that we've made an important part of our society. And so maybe that's something I need to take on myself and go, well, if that's what I want, Adam on down, if that's what I want,
I would paradise is what you call incubation, and it's like, you give yourself over to the terms of the place, or maybe you can establish it's like in this room, I've tried little minor versions of the same sort of thing, and it hasn't been as strong as in a public place or something like this, but not that I said in a park or something, that kind of probably would work, but and you let what happened to you, what happens to you, try to strip off those layers. Some people consider this a month of shutting out the certain influences and make yourself what you really are, should be, something like that.
Yeah. So that's what I would say as far as the things that need to be cut off from us personally is the religious need to receive from another person the word rather than finding the word for yourself. And that is something I try to, I'll tell you what, I do my ritual for higher service, and I try to discourage it as much as I can because I don't like it. It's not fun. But I'll tell you what, if somebody wants to throw me a few grand to perform a ritual, I'll do it for them. I don't mind taking their money, but I would much rather they learn how to do it themselves. They go through the experience of that ritual or that magical process. But yeah. So, well, and then what was the second part of that question that you had?
Basically symbolic representation of what these things and processes could be. Of course, that can be extended into its whole new program. But that was sort of my question: is what sort of words or symbols or something could represent these changes? But
this, at least for myself on my path, there are two alternating and potentially conflicting symbols, and that is the symbol of the fallen angel or the devils that were cast out, and that is extremely important because I don't think it's talking about the demons that you can summon. I think it's talking about us, and that we are divorced from Source. We are part of Source. We are a manifestation of Source that is interestingly conscious of such, and we can take the step of pushing away and saying and creating our own creations, creating our own realities. And
certainly, back to an earlier word, but in a different language instead of Aramea, if you take shaitan and turn it into the Arabic, it's certainly it's a choice that either the human being or the fire being might be better understood, because some people are like, oh, the jinn is just one thing. No, jinn is all the male and female spiritual beings that people may call gods and goddesses, or maybe just spirits or something. But that's the word for all of them. A demon is someone who's taken their opportunity to not just snip up, be their own sort of thing. So it's a chosen role. It's an active sort of role. That's what there's one comment I got recently was, now I don't think I've been doing this, but it was definitely thought that my interviews with you, or one of them at least, was some sort of roast, and but I'm asking serious questions whether or not I agree or not. Apparently to some people, I guess maybe I have to start putting a proclaimer. It's like, obviously, I and whoever else may appear here is like obvious, and same thing with any media group or publication or something. It's like, we're our own people, our own whatever beliefs and practices we have. We don't necessarily accept all the ones that other people do, even if, as saying, getting an article or a book out for someone. But
yeah, and so, well, and to that point, I think the most important thing that we can do is to have conversations. If it's just me in a vacuum, my growth is halted. I have not only do I have no influences, no inspirations, but I also have no conflict. Because I'll tell you what, like, if I'm just living amongst animals, the conflict is nil. But when I'm living amongst people that I have to cooperate with or conflict with, that forces growth. It's like Wayne Dyer says that your soulmate is not somebody who's just like you; it's somebody that you can't stand, somebody that pushes you. And I'll tell you what, I agree with that. And so, no.
Why I respect on YouTube and stuff. I will sometimes not watch a video or not subscribe to a channel because things are closed. Not that I necessarily need the person that runs the channel seeing my comment, because a lot of them will never see my comment because they're big enough, or maybe they just don't pay attention. But it's like, I do mind when people start saying stuff like you should be killed, or and that's that sort of stuff. But respectful disagreement, whatever, express that. Your own experience is like, my like the Glacier work. I went through the whole series, and the colors and sights and whatnot and feelings and whatnot that I got could be completely different from someone else. And it's like, I'm not discounting what they're saying too, and I want to hear, okay, what have you experienced that's like kind of the same. But if I have to respond to people with different psychologies and different material situations, it gets me to it can better my approach for myself. There's stuff all the time. It's like, I've looked at stuff again and again, and then someone points something out, and it's like, huh, try that. That does sound like it's better, at least something on the table.
Yeah. Well, and just because people are having a conversation and they don't necessarily agree doesn't mean that they're enemies. In fact, I think they're actually working together. Yeah. So for a point to that is that Michael W. Ford is publishing now with Become a Living God. And all my entire career, as I was struggling to make a name in the occult field for myself, all of my publishers said, this guy is your competition. He's your enemy. You got to beat him. You beat him. And I don't know that I ever did, but it's very cool now to have him coming on to Become a Living God, to working with him, and to go, this is a person that I disagree with some of his views pretty heavily, and I agree with some of his stuff somewhat all right. So, but it doesn't. There's not an enemyship there. There's a friendship. There's a camaraderie. Even though I hadn't really met him until recently, there was always that feeling of learning from competition.
Like I'm in touch with a Luciferian group from France that's always inviting me on Skype conversations and stuff. That used to be over Facebook when I had access to that. But it was partially started. But it's like one of the things people don't get about Luciferian. It's not, oh, you must read Michael W. Ford's book. There's, that's some of the first comments I got when I was very explicit that was part of what I considered myself to be on the channel, was like, either I was somehow ripping him off by commenting or something, or that oh no, you don't got it right because you have a different set of PowerPoints, you have a different set of this. That's sort of not what it is, that you quote such and such, but are in a different field. It's like, how many people say that when it comes to certain paths, Satanism and some other paths, that it's like, you are the prophet. Now, I don't consider everybody to fit the word prophet, but it's certainly a goal in some respects, is you can become, spiritually gifted.
So it's interesting, because that does kind of come back to the second thing, as far as the symbols of this ascent on an individual and a species-wide scale, is first is the devils, but then also is the concept of the supreme being and becoming the supreme being, and the two there are interesting in that. I think the challenge or the invitation in these mythologies is to embody every archetype in that symbolic mythology. That these gods, this whole pantheon, it's a buffet that you're supposed to digest and be changed by and embody each of these
God forms and all that, and the name you pour through the Bible, you pour through the Quran, you pour through the Hadith, you pour through the Avestan material of cultures that aren't so monotheistic. The formulas. Now you strip away the tawhid, the making one, and going to transcend it, and you find that each of these things are formulas. There was I don't know if I've mentioned to you before, but there was an Egyptian religion revival cult in California that I was in contact with over a decade ago, and they saw that there's ancient Egyptian reference that supports what they were doing too, but they thought, okay, these are all symbolic of actually what we're referring to, so they didn't take the form seriously. You find in some of the Hindu texts that the blue guy with 6 legs standing on someone and various other things that you see as the form, that's not it. It's symbolic of something, and there's even texts that tell you what it's symbolic of, and it turns out that that's some of the older material, and later on they became fanatical about, being stuck about the particular form of elephant or something, or monkey or something.
Yeah. No, I'll tell you what. That's that. I've had some loose associations, even more loose as of the last couple of years, with a particular offshoot of the Golden Dawn, and I accidentally wandered into one of their major rituals and was kind of blown away by how literal the interpretation can be. Where it's like, well, wait a minute, like you don't. If I want to make change, if I want to learn, or I want to dive into the spiritual realms, it's really as simple as just going inside of myself. All of the devas are here within the body, and it's interesting how external some people can get, and I don't think that serves.
Its experience goes both ways through you, and I've had some involvement with the Ordo Templi Orientis, and talked with people from other. There's a couple other groups that Aleister Crowley involved in that set up, because he didn't really set up the OTO. He just changed it. But when he took over, one of the things he did was he basically told at least the higher members, the lower grades, you may not get the point. It's not as explicit. It's implied all over the place. But the idea is, it's like he wanted to set people up to symbolically understand things and be able to make things work. Whatever path to create their own religions, once you got the higher grades, you should have the ability to take this sort of thing, create like your own religion, and are, there's associations with that word, I guess, because, but, you know what I mean, I think.
Yeah. Once again, there's
let me throw in I guess we should approach a closing, and let me apologize to anybody with this or any of the other live feeds. Since the last feed with Eric Arkellis Koetting here, I have not seen any of the chat comments. I've kept the thing open, so if they're it's not that. Well, I mean, I'm talking to whoever's there, but it's not like I won't consider it if I saw it. But for some reason, that has been closed to me ever since. So that would be explaining it. And since I previously talked to him in regards to his Kingdom of Flames grimoire and something something that addresses that area, I guess. There's a chant here, and I'm not sure what all the words mean. I have figured out what a few. But it kind of addresses, as you do your own thing, it has, basically things becoming in line with what you're doing in the various realms. And I got to figure out a better way to say that to explain that one. But if you don't mind, I'd like to close with a few rounds of the chant that I got the one night. And like a lot of nights where I end up experiencing something that's like, oh, I should have went to sleep hours ago, and then all of a sudden, I've just like the set before it and some other stuff in between. It's like, somehow I didn't need the sleep that I was missing, and I'm talking about the next day too. But I guess I needed to stay up to experience what I was going to, the strange words, I guess. Ivmgpz gzaf gzmgf hzhkzigf gvigz pvoz uzogfo Vivgrhzo zngz gvopz hzhkzigf Vopzaf pvoz kzigzgf zngf xzgf Hzzph zngz Pvog Rau gvigz hzzkzigf Vopzaf Vivgrhzo kzogzngr gvopz hzhkzigf Vopzaf pvoz kzigzgf zngf Hzzph zngz Pvog Rau kzhf Ivmgpz hzzhkzigf Vopzaf, ivgaizgf, Vopzaf, kzigzgf, zngf, kzogz, hzhph, Vimh, pvoz, Pvog Rau, zngf, Pvog.
Very nice. Thank you.
And find me more to the left than to the right. But sort of over the whole space, some sort of presences, I would say, and a darkness with sort of a blueness, more shadow per se, in the south side, my left here, and sort of the tingly feeling, but I don't really see too much there. I would say that I'm gonna let things fade naturally. It's as I said, the words kind of come up here for the heaven, hell, light being, fire being, clay being. Of course, humans were the clay beings, and I guess the other animals are too. I'm not sure what the other words mean, but as I said, it's sort of aligning things, your will with the will of what's going on. I guess is as I said, the meaning. So either it coming in line with you or you becoming in line with it. And as time goes on, I will share what some of these things mean elsewhere. Probably write my own grimoire of how to work the language at some point. But any final thoughts?
That is the task of the adept, is to formulate your own system, to in some traditions to create your own tarot or to write your own grimoire. That is one of the stages of initiation, is to create your own. So yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I appreciate your sincerity.
Yeah, one wanted to close, have a shorter session of this today. So let me close with the translation of another benediction that some people would have been hearing this month. So burning blessings upon you all, and if there, whether this is the last with him or if there's another one, we'll find out later. So
I'm pretty sure that we'll be talking again.
yeah, I'm sure I could think of something. Cthulhu, no more ears, right?